Hello everyone, welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is Joe Aiello. Joe just finishing up a 4-year term on the Winthrop Town Council. Congratulations on your time there. I think the main reason I'd like to hear you today is to sort of talk about the Town Council, what it's like to be on the Winthrop Town Council these days, what you learned from it, and sort of where you're going from here.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. And yeah, happy to talk about that or anything else that you'd like to talk about. So the first thing is that you can literally work 80 hours a week as a town councilor,
Right.
because you have a wide variety of things to have to worry about. First of all, it's a direct business of the council and the committees of the council. And even for those committees where you're not a member of, it's sort of reading and understanding and talking to people about what's coming on the agenda, trying to get certain topics on the agenda. That's one dimension of it that I think probably everybody sees. Constituent services is another big thing. Zoning Board of Appeals, questions about water bills, leaks, et cetera. Some of the localized impacts of climate change that have been happening, flooding during storms, et cetera. And then the third dimension is sort of larger regional issues, which you have to pay attention to in order to, I believe, effectively participate in the discussions at the town council and really in community discussions. And that is climate change, the environment, transportation, air pollution, regional mobility, all those kinds of things. So you have to sort of be careful to try not to extend yourself too much and understand the reality of the limitations of the office. And this is a design of government, which is, it's largely a volunteer position, and it doesn't come with staff, right?
So one of the things I want to get at is the degree to which it feels like it's optimized. And Winthrop's a town of about 19,000 people. We sit right next to Boston, which is obviously a big city, but the council members, I think, are paid like $100,000 or some amount like that. I mean, it's a much different, a totally different situation. I get it. But I mean, with Winthrop, I think you're paid like $50 a week, I believe. Really different situation, but there's all kinds of differences in different ways we can structure. I'm just wondering, from being on it 4 years, big picture, do you see any kind of, you have a sense as to maybe any major ways in which the whole system could be run better in this town?
Well, I think, you know, if you're interested in being on the council,
Yeah.
you certainly need to study the council and pay attention to it. You don't need to be an expert in it. And you have to make a determination with the current structure, whether or not you can contribute adequately based upon the limitations I just described. I don't think the form of government is going to change. There are things that we could do as a council to make town government and the activities of the council more available to the larger public. Okay. So we have sort of a small set of citizens who, God bless them, they pay attention to 90% of the council meetings. A lot of them show up on a regular basis, but it's maybe 1% of the population.
Right.
But little things that could happen, and I would argue should happen. You know, when you are, as a council, ending one council meeting, you know that there's going to be another council meeting in 2 weeks.
Right.
Perhaps we ought to outline what the agenda is going to be 2 weeks hence.
Right.
So people who are interested in, again, transportation or water and sewer rates or whatever it might be,
Right.
Have a chance to do a little bit of digging.
Right.
It doesn't mean sort of having to wait till the Friday afternoon before the Monday meeting. It really makes it much, much more available. The second thing is, if anything is going to be presented to the council, PowerPoint decks or memos, why don't we release them on the Thursday before the Monday meeting, as opposed to everybody only seeing them when they're put up on the screen. And it sort of makes the average citizen to have to play a little bit of defense in trying to catch up and understand in order to participate in the discussion. So I think we could do a better job of making it available to all. We also should think about the non-English speaking households, for which there's a significant amount in this town, and whether or not we can do a better job of communicating what the town, not just the town council, but what the town government is up to, how it affects their lives, and just as importantly, how they can engage with the council and the town government to make sure that they're getting the services that they need, or they get the questions that they have answered.
So you got right into the nuts and bolts quickly, and that's good. So like, have you suggested that to people on the council, and what reaction have you gotten when you've said these kinds of things?
You know, I've made the suggestions. The problem is the last 2 years have been, I would say, talking to a lot of past councils has been very unusual. It's been driven so much by the divisiveness of 3A that
We have to, and we'll just stop and remind people 3A is the housing law that requires every city and town, well, most every city and town around the Boston area to add some multifamily housing.
That's right. So a lot of things sort of we'd like to have got done, got ground to a halt. Important things, though, did get done. You know, Hannah Belcher, as an example,
The former
former councilor, picked
president.
up from work that another former councilor did, Steve Ruggiero, to try to figure out what's the right fit for the Airbnb short-term rental thing. And that resulted in a great piece of legislation that really updated our codes with respect to Airbnbs. It not only limits the number of Airbnbs that we would enable at any given time, but also make sure that it's very clear that corporations cannot have Airbnbs, that the owner of the property has to be on the property or has to have an agent on the available to be on the property for 24 hours. That gives confidence to people who are living adjacent to Airbnbs, that there's going to be accountability if there's ever an emergency there or if there's ever any misbehavior. Not that that stuff is common, but you want to guard against potential public safety issues around that. So that's one example.
Joel, to pull out that example, is there something about those circumstances that made that situation more amenable to a productive, cooperative solution as opposed to maybe other things that the council deals with or maybe should deal with?
You know, it's a great example, I would say, of people thinking what they were worried about an issue turned out to be something quite different than where we ended up.
Okay.
The initial notion of Airbnbs was that revenue from the Airbnbs, some of the fees in there, largely come to the town. Which in a town like Winthrop, which doesn't have a commercial base, you're looking for fees wherever you can get them. So if a new kind of business line is opening up, that was it. And so I think there was a jump, like a lot of municipalities did. Winthrop is not alone, to say, hey, we want to be in that business and we want to enable that to happen. Over time, you start getting complaints about parking, too many people coming into the Airbnb. There have been some examples of parties and disruptive behavior from Airbnbs. So the conversation generally shifted to how can we make sure that everybody's going to have a Airbnb is registered? How can we make sure that we've got the ability to understand and guard against those who don't want to register and run illegal Airbnbs? And how do we make sure that this kind of activity can contribute to the town while having issue number one settled, which is make sure it doesn't turn into a public safety and public health issue.
So did all this happen in the context of like a civil discussion within the town council and residents, and is that?
Amazingly civil over a period of my entire 4 years, because again, it started with Steve Ruggiero really taking the lead when I first got there, and then it was picked up by Hannah and brought all the way to conclusion.
So why do you suppose that is an example of something that worked well, but maybe some other things haven't? What does it tell us about our structure or our town or anything that this points out to us?
You know, if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be a professor of political science, which I'm not. It's hard to tell when anything sort of goes from abstract to implementation, where things can go off the rails and people stop talking to each other. And I'm not that good a student of government and sociological things to understand what triggers those things.
Well, the counterpoint, of course, is the 3A situation, which seems to, in a lot of ways, been the opposite, in which it's seemed to a lot of people there was a fairly simple solution for how to handle it, which is just simply what people call paper compliance. You just simply meet the minimum requirements that the state asks for and be done with it, and sign the document and be done with it. And yet it blew up and still is a big thing in this town, and we're sort of a focal point for the state in terms of one of the few towns that is still dealing with it. What I mean, we could be an hour talking about this, but is basically, if you can tell people what went wrong there, and what other thing have we learned? Are we learning from that? Is that more of a deeper reflection of this town, or is that more anomaly, or what?
I think it was an anomaly, and I think it's a couple of lessons here. One is that the power of social media. I think the opponents got on social media. They got really vocal on social media. And frankly, a subset of them just entered into a scare campaign. There was the issue of, no, this is home rule, it's against home rule. They said it with great confidence. That turned out not to be true. This is unconstitutional, and everybody got their hair on fire over it was unconstitutional. That turned out not to be true. The Attorney General can't enforce it. They were certain about that. And all this stuff spread over social media, that there was this great imposition of the state government over some area they had never entered before, which was not true. But, when you have a town the size of Winthrop, we don't have a communications department. We don't have an economic development department. I'm not saying we should have those things.
Yeah.
But the limitations of government to then project out what the truth is and to effectively communicate it. We don't do social media programs. We don't do that kind of stuff. Right. My sense a large part of it was bad information got out there. It was repeated. The government, and I would say us as a council, didn't do a good job of countering all that.
Right.
And, so we ended up where we are, which was, in my personal view, a real shame because, as you said, the planning board, I've said this publicly a couple of times, probably had among the most innovative solutions of anybody within the 174 cities and towns that were required to submit a plan under 3A. And the only one that did it when they were a volunteer body. I mean, it was just quite extraordinary. That really was protective of the community. Now, the one good thing is it's still sitting there. So, if the state government decides it wants to enforce the issue over the 12 remaining towns, I think it is, there is a plan B sitting there that effectively means zero impact on the community.
So we now have a new town council that seems very aligned on this position of fighting 3A. I'm just wondering, you can't predict the future, I suppose, but there's also signs that there's maybe people looking for compromise. I know the town council president and I want to ask you about this, just proposed the idea of the current fire station in downtown that's going to become vacant when they build a new one, maybe creating some kind of a theater-ish or arts community center there, which is not maybe what you might have expected in terms of some of the politics that have lined up. I'm wondering, do you feel like, well, I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on that particular proposal specifically, but just generally, is there a feel that maybe we're going to sort of let 3A settle down and we can go back to being a town that talks a little bit more to each other?
I honestly, I don't know the answer to that because that's going to be a function of what the state decides to do. So the ball's in the state's court. With respect to the use of the fire station and all that, I think that's a terrific idea. It was originally proposed by Marcy Hamilton and a couple of other people, 2 years ago. And I think we do need a place for the performing arts and for small music venues, et cetera. And if we can figure out how to do it. East Boston pulled it off. There's this thing out in Maverick Square. Zoomix in my old neighborhood. And it's just a spectacular thing. They offer music lessons to people, children all the way through adults. They show movies occasionally at a small scale. So, that's encouraging that the council may pick that up. But it means, creating a nonprofit. It means raising money. There's a whole series of steps there. But we should pursue it, I believe.
Well, plus one of the things it gets into is the whole question of whether Winthrop wants to be doing things to bring in more people or not. I mean, that seems like a real live question in this town. Obviously there's a need for revenue because we're very dependent on tax revenue just from residents living here, don't really have a lot of outside business. And yet there's also certainly a very strong sentiment that probably the 3A debate reflected, which is people who don't really want to have a lot of, ancillary activities going on in town. Do you have a read on that in terms of, one, how important it is that we somehow grow in some way, and two, what the political hurdles might be to doing that?
Well, I think it's awful difficult to sort of really have a much more robust set of people coming to visit the town and participate in restaurants than we already have.
Yeah.
The reality is we're a peninsula, and we're a peninsula that's hard to get to, right? So for most people in the region, you have to fight either coming down Route 1 or coming through the tunnels, getting past Logan Airport, getting past downtown Boston. And it's just not that easy a journey for a lot of people. And I think that those access restrictions with the build out of Suffolk Downs, with the rest of the big trucking facilities being built on Route 1, more likely to get worse than they are to get better. So I think that's not likely. I think the pursuit of revenue is a different question. And I think there are opportunities both in the pursuit of revenue and second in learning from past mistakes. Just as an example, one thing that really surprised me was to learn the number of lawsuits and settlements we've had with employees in this town over the last 10 to 15 years, right? Okay. In today's dollars, depends upon how you inflate them and all that stuff, it's probably as much as $8 million, okay, right, that we've paid out. Now, those things happen. Nobody's happy about them. But I think it's important to try to make sure that we don't repeat those things, okay, to make sure that there's full transparency around these things. And also do something that's called an after-action report. Like, what happened, how did it happen, and what are we doing different now to make sure that doesn't happen? Because revenue leakage is something that we have to guard against. We have to make sure every single dollar, no matter what, is being spent on behalf of our taxpayers extraordinarily well. Right. And I think we've got to do a better job in that arena. The second thing is, you look at all of the agencies around us. Now, we're beginning to get a better deal out of the MBTA finally, and that is through the ferry. Okay. I think we need to push harder with respect to our bus system for more service, more frequent service, and bus shelters and all of those kinds of things to make it as convenient as you possibly can, and to really get the T to market the T in Winthrop. Because for so many years, if you were to go back 10 years ago, we were still running what were effectively glorified school buses. Okay. Today, 10 years later, thanks to a bunch of young people in this town, we have full T buses, we have fare media that accept the T pass, and we actually, because of the transfer benefit, we actually have a lower cost of using the T than we did 10 years ago. It's remarkable what we did in addition to the ferry. We need to continue on that pathway to there. But let's look at Logan as an example. And I talked about this in one of our last meetings. Massport, I'm delighted they have it, but they have this net zero with respect to carbon emissions program. Right. But if you go online and you look at the net zero program, I think it's on page 27 of their strategic document, maybe page 17, there's a big teardrop that shows how they're going to get to net zero. Okay. And it shows, bringing in more electric thises and more electric acids and getting rid of certain heating sources, et cetera. But a large part of that teardrop is what's called buying credits for carbon reduction someplace else. Okay. So what happens in this world of carbon credits is you decide it's going to cost me too much to further reduce to get to net zero, so I'm going to buy a piece of forest in Uzbekistan, someplace. Right. As that forest grows, it absorbs carbon, and now you take the credit for the reduction of carbon. I think that's an insultful idea, and I think it's an insultful idea.
Insultful? Like
Like insulting.
Insulting, okay.
Okay, maybe.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification on the use of the English language. I can use that. Why not invest that money here?
Yeah.
Right? Why not we've got a Mass Save program,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Which is a terrific program in some respects. It has its limitations.
Right.
But they'll pay, as an example, I think it's 50% of the cost of insulating your home and putting in new windows. A lot of people don't have the other 50%.
Yeah.
Particularly people who are stressed economically. We could get you solar panels.
Yeah.
We could get you those mini splits to help you with not only heating but air conditioning at a lower cost.
Right.
Why don't we get Massport to buy the other 50% for people
Yeah.
and lower the carbon footprint, but for Massport, give them all the credits because we haven't declared net zero,
Yeah.
but reduce the cost of living for people,
Yeah. So,
right?
so you've gone into several different topics. I'm sort of letting them accumulate, but let's get to that since that
But
one
again,
last.
let me just say,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really bright, I didn't get this on my own. There's a lot of bright people in this town who talk about a wide variety of things like that. And we need to sort of surface those folks into a community discussion to figure out how we can achieve our goals collectively.
Right.
I'm not sure if the council's the right place for it because it's a transactional environment.
Right.
You know, how much are we going to appropriate for this and how much are we going to do this, how much are we going to do that. But we need to get the wide variety of minds to come together to figure out how to improve
Well,
our
we did have a
lives.
climate commission. We still do technically.
And by the way, they're terrific.
Yeah, but
They're
they've also,
terrific.
as we know, they've halted their work in what seems to be a protest of the fact that they don't see, that, at least in their perspective, the town council not seriously funding climate mitigation. Let's get
The council doesn't have enough money to fund climate mitigation. When you're talking $70 million of things that need to be done in the next 10 years, $7 million a year. If you look at our that's our capital program. If you look at our capital program, when you take out state and federal money, we spend about $2 million a year of our own money.
Yeah.
So there's no way we can do that. We need to get the grants.
Right. Well, that gets into the
state and federal
3A,
government.
and that's the big, yeah. Just a few things. One, we had Representative Turco on the show just a couple days ago. He did talk about net zero quite a bit. He's very concerned with it. And one of the things he was suggesting was to just get rid of the mandates for it entirely. His argument is that because the wind power is now under attack on the federal level, we're not going to get the energy we were expecting to get from wind power, and therefore we can't pursue net zero anymore in the mass save amounts. I'm wondering if one of the things we talked about was nuclear, and he even held out the possibility of maybe considering at least the safety option of a nuclear plant on Deer Island. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, that has a bunch of different components. First of all, windmills. You know, God help us. I hope the Democrats take over the House and maybe the Senate in November of this year. Trump has really run rampant on a whole bunch of stuff. At some point, the Republicans have to get some kind of a spine. Maybe we're delayed by 2 years or 3 years, but there's no doubt that wind power will come back. So to say, oh my God, wind power is gone and dead and dead and dead, you know, Trump signs these executive orders, they're going to last as long as he's there, and they're going to go poof when he's not there. So I disagree about the future of wind power. If you look around the world, wind power has become, along with solar power, some of the most cost-effective sources of energy, and with the advancements of battery technology, has become something that's now reliable for 24 hours a day and through the winter and summer seasons. So that is going to be a part of our mix. With respect to small nuclear, listen, there's been a lot of innovations done there. I do worry about doing anything at the MWRA plant. I mean, those big egg tanks are highly explosive. And if something were to happen, even if it was a small something, but it triggered a problem with the giant digester eggs,
full of methane.
that would be extraordinarily damaging to the town of Winthrop. There was a third component. Oh, the mass save thing. You know, the mass save thing, I think he's right in that the program design of Mass Save was to put a surcharge on the gas and oil heating and take that surcharge and put it into a pot to help make sure people are doing solar and wind and heat pumps and all that stuff I talked about. In reality, what's happened is that the beneficiaries, the primary beneficiaries, not completely, have been wealthier people. So wealthier people have been able to pay that copay, that 50% or 25%, and they've got an extraordinary part of the benefit. And that's clearly on the government's radar, federal government, the state government's radar screen. They've got to figure out how to offset that. I don't know the right answer, but if you look at the so-called millionaire's tax, which is now producing a lot more money than it ever has before, that tax is paid for people, by people who are making over $1 million a year. That gets inflated every year, so the bogey gets higher. Instead of taking the money and put a surcharge and making gas and oil more expensive for everybody, maybe the subsidies for people who want to go green and want to have that lower cost of living come from something like the millionaire's tax, make it more equitable. So he's right on that. I think we got to search for the right solution. But the program itself, if you want to eventually lower people's cost of living, there's nothing like a combination of solar powers, heavy insulation, and heat pumps.
So before we run out of time, there's at least a couple.
He's in the right direction on that.
Okay. Before we run, a couple of things I want to double back on. One, you kind of slipped in there this whole issue of legal costs involving problems with town employees, and I'm just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit. Is there some kind of a summary of that, and is Winthrop's problem with that any different than most other towns?
That I don't know, right? That I don't know. It's you keep hearing cases, and I don't want to discuss particular cases because it involves individual people, but there have been cases that have been described to us in executive session, and whether that's more or less than other towns, I don't know. What I do know is that once they're settled, those are public information. I think in all municipalities, there's a reluctance to be transparent about those kinds of things. But more importantly, I'm not looking to look at the case law on some particular issue, but tell us what happened, tell us why it happened, and tell what measures we've now taken to make sure these things don't repeat themselves. Mistakes always get made in life. No one ever runs perfect, right? But those after-action reports, I think, are pretty standard in any place, private sector, public sector, to make sure you acknowledge and you learn from it.
So is the case history in Winthrop tend to be just a series of random situations, or is there sort of a pattern, either tied to a particular department or a particular behavior or a particular problem that the town should know about?
I think it's spread a bit. I'm not up to it, but I know there have been a number of them.
And is the town insured against that? I mean, is that kind of thing where suddenly we could get like a $10 million increase in our taxes one day?
Sure. Usually one insures against that stuff. I know we have insurance. But here's the problem with insurance. It's sort of the same thing as having car insurance, right? You get in an accident, your insurance covers it, your rate goes up. You get another accident, your rate goes up higher. All your deductibles go higher or something like that. So, there's no free lunch in this, and I think we need to make sure that we take these measures and we try to reduce the likelihood of that stuff happening again.
Okay. The other thing before we leave is we talked right at the beginning and a little bit in between about participation in town events in the Spanish-speaking population in Winthrop, and it seems like something that's not heavily addressed, especially given the proportion of Spanish-speaking households in this town. Is there anything you would sort of suggest, and I realize, again, a long discussion, but anything you would sort of just put out there as a way of doing a lot better specifically with regard to that population in this town and in our school systems, for that matter, to make it a more welcoming and functional and sort of inclusive community with this particular part of the community?
Again, I'm not an expert on it, but I'll tell you this. I'm old enough to remember growing up in East Boston and being part of the political fabric of Boston. I was never a politician or anything like that. But the reality was that for many, many, many years, decades, Black residents and Latino residents of the city of Boston did not participate in government. And you look at today, right? It's changed dramatically. I don't know what caused that, right? I've been living in Winthrop for a long time, since the 1980s. But certainly a set of things happened, whether it was as a result of the municipality itself doing things, whether it was a result of community groups trying to encourage more participation in it. I think it's worth a case study, and it's worth learning from and trying to figure out how we mimic. Now, don't forget, again, we have a much more limited ability to do those things with respect from the governmental side, just because of the restrictions in the town government we have, which is
You mean financially?
Financially, yeah. I mean, we don't have downtown Boston office buildings that can contribute to the payment of the public schools and contribute to, social programs that are greatly needed.
Right.
So there will need to be a way that's probably more in line with maybe smaller municipalities that have been on this pathway before us.
Right.
But I'm sure there are examples that others can learn from.
Yeah. Well, Joe Aiello, former town council member, we could talk all day, but thank you very much for the time. It was very interesting.
Sure, happy to be here with you. And this forum is really important to the public, and I'm glad that CAT continues to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.